collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up on this week's programme, Cyprus has been selected to participate for the first time in the World Poetry Slam Championships.
Literally is a 3-minute maximum piece that you perform on stage in front of an audience who judges your skills as a writer-performer.
The Italian ambassador heads to Rome, taking fond memories of his time in Cyprus.
The biggest of them is the friendship for the people, the openness, and the way they were welcoming me in their home and sharing their friendship with other friends.
And with migration much in the local news at the moment, the EU Commission representation in Cyprus organised an online discussion about integration and societal attitudes to migrants.
The aim of the school, and therefore of the teachers, is first of all to create a safe environment for every child, regardless of their background or their family's background.
Cyprus is going to be, for the very first time, represented at the upcoming World Slam Poetry Championships, and we're joined by the gentleman who's going to represent us. His name is Argyri Loizou, and he joins us now. Argyri, first of all, I think, for those of us not in the know, tell us what slam poetry is.
That's a very good question. I try to explain it to my Cypriot friends, and they all look at me in a weird sort of haze. They ask, is it poetry? I'm like, something like poetry. Is it performance piece? It's something like performance piece. Literally is a 3-minute maximum piece that you perform on stage in front of an audience who judges your skills as a writer-performer. But for me, honestly, Poetry Slam is about speaking your emotional truth and being able to transcend to people who don't know you, how you are thinking and especially feeling at that time. I know it sounds maybe a little bit pretentious, but that's probably the best way I can explain it. If you want a shorter way, it's poetry with oomph.
But it's poetry that's said, isn't it? So, I mean, it's down to communicating more, isn't it?
Yes, to articulating how you are feeling at that particular point in time. That's the poetry. Poetry is truth. Poetry Slam is expressing it to a live audience in the best way you can in a certain amount of time.
Let me get this right. Is it only about how you feel, or could you talk for 3 minutes about something not even related to you?
Exactly. It can be anything as long as it's close to your heart. We have people speaking about the environment, speaking about, unfortunately, sexual encounters that they had. About myself, I have muscular dystrophy, depression, Asperger's, and I try to convey that to an audience so that they can better understand maybe what I'm going through, and also, obviously, I can articulate to myself what I'm going through myself. So yeah, as long as it's something that you're passionate about, that is acceptable, and the more passionate you are about it, the more skilled that you are, then it is, yes, it's definitely an art form. The foundations are there, but you can do whatever you would like with it, if that makes sense.
Do you write it down and learn it by heart, or is it off the cuff?
No, it's not off the cuff. The piece that I performed, hopefully you've seen it. I experienced that piece. I took it to a different way in my head. I wrote it down. I edited it as much as I could, and then I memorized it the best way possible, the best I could. And then from that, you perform it, hopefully in open mics. And fortunately, we have a couple of open mics in Cyprus. We have the Right to Why in Nicosia. We have one in Limassol by Melissa Zenga, and also we have open mic in Larnaca, which I organize with James Akai and Annette Benzar. So we have platforms to perform your pieces, to practice to an audience, so that you can see how the audience feels and maybe practice it over and over and over. Yes.
Now, you're going to represent Cyprus at the World Championships.
Yes.
Do you write a new piece for that? How often do you write new slam poetry?
Well, it depends. How often do you feel like the need of a cup of coffee? How will you feel at that moment? So I particularly am not a prolific writer. It takes me a while to find something that I feel passionate about, and not find passionate about, to express emotionally, to articulate emotionally on the paper. But for the slam poetry, there's one every year organized by Ideograma, Lilianora, and they ask usually for two pieces. Now, this year's slam in Belgium, where I'm at right now, they asked for one piece only, and for the World Championships, they will ask for, again, only one piece. So I was thinking about it, and the piece that I performed then became in the top 10. There wasn't as much Greek Cypriot that I wanted, so I want to represent Cyprus as much as I can. So I'm thinking about doing another piece to express my language in Greek Cypriot more, because I feel that for the World Poetry Slam that it would be appropriate.
So it's going to be in Greek at the World Championships?
So I was born in UK, and I'm to Cypriot parents, and I moved to Cyprus when I was 15. So my background is Anglo-Cypriot. So again, the way I can truthfully portray myself is to speak in Anglo-Cypriot. So that's what I'm going to try to do. It'll be partly in English, partly in Greek Cypriot, but it'll be 100% passion.
Right, that's fascinating, because I suppose at the World Championships there are slam poems in every language just about.
Exactly. So, and it helps a lot, because this year they have, not this year, I think usually they have the translations while performing the back in English and French. I can't remember the other language it was right now, I'm sorry, but everyone can follow the piece and the performance no matter what language it is in.
Wow, because translating poetry is no easy task.
No easy task at all. I must praise the organization of the Poetry Slam this year, because they sat with us personally, each one of us, and asked us, is this word right? Do I express this word correctly in different languages? So the organizers work closely with the artists to make sure that's the best representation of the piece itself.
Well, it's obviously going to be a very exciting time. When does the World Championship take place, and how long have you got to prepare for it?
Well, it's in September next year, so it'll be in Brussels again. It's my first time in Brussels, and I'm so excited to come again, because it's an absolutely incredible city. So yeah, I have a little bit of time to prepare for it. Again, there'll be open mics in Larnaca, Nicosia, in Limassol. So I urge people to attend. Not only that, but because there's the Cyprus Poetry Slam is in March, and I want to inspire people and help people so that they can participate, because I do not want to be Poetry Slam champion for the third year running. I want to give other people not just a chance, but to inspire them and help them, so that we have more young people. Because I do believe poetry is universal, but Poetry Slam is much more leaned towards the youth. And in today's society, where people express themselves nonchalantly online, it'd be fantastic to express to a wider audience that understands their poetic language.
Very exciting stuff, and something that I think is not perhaps as well known as obviously you would like it to be in Cyprus and possibly around the world. So we've been talking to Argyri Loizou, who will be representing Cyprus next September at the World Slam Poetry Championships. Argyri, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much.
Listen online to the Cyprus News Digest on YouTube or at cyprusmail.libsyn.com. The latest program is uploaded every Friday, and if you missed one, you can catch up there.
In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
The biggest achievement of Crime Stoppers has been the ability of the public to be able to give information about crime anonymously.
There's no way I could have kept prostituting without the drugs. There's no way I could have had my body used like a public toilet, because that's actually what prostitution is.
And then the fourth series I started 3 days after I'd won the Oscar, so the whole of the Monarch of the Glen experience was all interplatted with the Gosford Park Oscar experience.
I was working with Ronnie James Dio, and David was going to reform Whitesnake in 2003.
Cyprus was chosen because Cyprus is a stable, peaceful and secure place.
We have to really look closely. What are we doing with children? What are we doing with adolescents? And what are we doing with adults that can help them move into a more literate situation?
The ones that I'm proudest of are the ones that were true discoveries, where we found something we didn't know existed.
As we've said many times before on the programme, the diplomatic corps, of course, like everywhere in the world, comes and goes. But one gentleman who's made a real mark during his term in Cyprus is Italy's ambassador to Nicosia, Andrea Cavallari. He joins us now because he's leaving for home. Andrea, if you look back over your time in Cyprus, can you pick out for me maybe the highs? I'm sure there were a few lows too. We can come to them in a minute. But what did you get from your time here? Because every country, I think, offers a diplomat something a little bit different.
Well, thank you so much, Rosie, for this question. I think it's very difficult to highlight one or two aspects in a period of 4 years, even if some part of it were limited by the pandemic. But certainly, my period here in Cyprus has been a particular happy and busy one. It was a period where relations in the Mediterranean were at some time tense, but also marked by the increasing cooperation between the country and the area. And Italy, being part of this Mediterranean, of this common sea, we call it Mare Nostrum, has been a particular active actor in the relation in this part of the Mediterranean, and Cyprus, belonging to the family of the European Union, has been a fantastic partner for us in all this period.
You came here, I think, very soon after the, can we call it a debacle of Crans-Montana, and that must have been a very difficult time, particularly for diplomats who, after all, are diplomats. So did that affect how you approached your job here in Cyprus?
Well, I have to say that the fact that for more than 4 years now, there's not been any particular development in the negotiation for the settlement of the Cyprus issue is a matter of sadness, first of all, in the sense that being in Cyprus, you meet with people belonging from both communities, and you share the sentiment that they prove vis-à-vis the issue of the reunification of the island. And that's why I'm saying the sentiment is a sentiment of sadness for the fact that there's been no development during this period. But at the same time, I think there is hope that if the people want it, if there is the strong will from the leadership as well to indicate the road, the island could be reunited in the future. People should not stop working for this, and I think that I've met with so many Cypriots for both community really engage toward this goal.
How far can foreign embassies facilitate something like this? You can't actually play an active role in many ways because that would be called interference, and Cypriots have long said we don't want foreign interference. But I'm well aware from all the ambassadors that I speak to that it is of a concern to them, and they're all, in a sense, trying to facilitate something that could turn out to be a positive development.
You know, each of us has a different role. If you are from a country that sits in the Security Council as a permanent member, or if you are a member of the European Union, representing a country from the European Union, you have different roles, and your level of involvement is different. Certainly, we tried, and I speak for Italy, we try to support as much as possible the intensification of relation between the two communities. Culture being one of the area where Italy has a special relationship, and that's why during my tenure I tried to push as much as I could the cultural relation between Italy and Cyprus as a whole.
And it wasn't just culture, you did a lot of that, but you also did a lot of work on trade and the economy as well. Tell me a little bit about that, because I believe that trade between Cyprus and Italy is also quite important. We may be small, but we're quite significant in certain areas.
Yes, and the interest for Cyprus is growing among the Italian companies. We have recently had the participation of quite a large number of Italian companies to an exhibition and fair here in Cyprus on oil and gas. But oil and gas is not the only area where the Italian companies are interested too. There are now a great interest in the renewable energies and the need for the transition for the Cypriot economy toward a more friendly and green economy.
Finally, let me ask you, what is the one thing that you will take away from Cyprus as you go back and settle in your home in Rome?
Well, I will need a big container to bring with me all the good things that I was presented with during my period in Cyprus. The biggest of them is the friendship of the people, the openness, and the way they were welcoming me in their home and sharing their friendship with other friends.
That is the now former ambassador to Nicosia from the Foreign Ministry of Italy, His Excellency Andrea Cavallari. We're sorry to see him go.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
This week in Cyprus, temperatures plummeted. We've had hail, storms, lashing rain, and snow on the mountains. Well, that's fine if you've got a roof over your head, but what if you're living in a tent? That's the plight of thousands of asylum seekers and refugees who've ended up in the Purnara Reception Centre, which was built with a capacity for 800 people and currently holds over 2,500. It's muddy, it's cold, the toilets don't work properly and are inadequate for the number of people there. The problem list goes on and on. Which brings us to a discussion that was held last week by the representation of the European Commission in Cyprus. It was an online discussion on migration, the challenges of integration, discrimination, and the protection of human rights. It's quite well known that there have been incidences in schools of migrant children being singled out by children from our host community, and the bullying and name-calling, and sometimes worse, has been reported. One of the guest speakers was Dr. Elena Papamikhail from the Cyprus Pedagogical Institute. She was asked how we can change attitudes. Do we need legal changes first and then attitudes will change? Or do we need to start with changing attitudes at home and then we don't need legal changes? Should we perhaps try to do both at the same time?
In order for not to be disappointed, we don't start with the aim of changing attitudes. At least, that's my view based on all my backgrounds as a teacher trainer, as an academic, and as a researcher, and as a teacher myself. people do not change their attitudes because they did a workshop or a seminar, or because they saw a poster or an ad on TV or on social media, or because they went to a demonstration or something. That we know of. Also, based on the concept of attitudes itself is problematic based on social psychology, in the sense that it's not always possible to measure it or identify it or see if it's there or not. Also, pedagogically, what we know is that regardless of what somebody has in their mind or in their hearts or whatever you call attitudes or however you see them, it's how they behave that matters. And it's their behavior that becomes evident to others. And it's the behavior that may hurt, that may discriminate, that may marginalize, or that may even kill another person, okay? So we look at the behaviors, and considering that the aim of the school and therefore of the teachers is first of all to create a safe environment for every child, regardless of their background or their family's background, it means that the teachers and the school have a huge responsibility in avoiding or stopping any violent behaviors, whether these are verbal or non-verbal or whatever. We need the framework, whether it's legal framework or policy framework or school regulations framework, to provide the teachers and the schools with the tools to stop and to prevent and to deal with racist behaviors, because they're there, they're not going to disappear. Now, we also know through research that the culture changes after a policy is implemented and during the implementation of a policy. For example, to make a parallel note here, people used to smoke inside the homes during dinner, at the dinner table, in the homes everywhere, okay? 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Nobody forces somebody now. The law doesn't require that somebody gets out of their own house to smoke. They're allowed by the law to smoke in their house. But because of the implementation of the law about smoking indoors, almost everyone I know, and I think this is a common experience, doesn't smoke at their home anymore. So culture changes gradually and slowly through the implementation of policy. Fortunately or not, this also requires consequences or fines or some sort of negative consequence to somebody behaving in a racist way, let's say. So the short answer is that yes, attitudes, however you conceptualize them, can change, but we might not always be aware of these changes. They are not always evident in every context. Each individual behaves in a different way in a different context based on the identities that are ascribed to them or that they self-identify with every time. What can definitely change, and this is our aim, is the behaviors. The racist behaviors, whether these come from individuals, whether they're intentional or not, or whether they're institutional, because institutions can also behave or have racist consequences based on their policies or their decisions, whether they aim to do this or not. So we're not a court, schools are not a court where we have to prove the racist motive for a defendant to be proven guilty or not. Schools are safe spaces, or we want them to be safe spaces for every child to learn and to develop and to be happy, first of all. So the aim is not to punish anyone. The aim is to recognize all these behaviors and teach through example and through the policy implementation that some behaviors are not acceptable, whether they come from racist motives or not.
So the objective is not to change the attitude per se, but to raise awareness and to avoid the behavior, the racist behavior.
On the first level. This is the first level. The attitudes may change or they may not. On the next level, the first level, you cannot go the same way I train teachers or the same way a teacher enters a class. You cannot enter a class and expect that because you might say something or do something or provide an activity or a workshop, people's attitudes will change from one day to the other.
Dr. Elena Papamichail talking there about the situation for migrant children in schools. Meanwhile, at the reception centre, conditions continue to deteriorate. A visit by members of our parliament last week also threw up criticism aplenty about the conditions in which all these people are being kept. The Interior Minister lashed out at the criticism, saying it had done more than any other government to try and deal with the problem. Nevertheless, it's splitting Cypriot citizens down the middle, with those who say we've got far too many asylum seekers and those who say that they're here, we need to at least give them the dignity of proper human rights and a speedier application of the law so that those who do deserve to be protected are, and those who don't will be sent home.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
In other news this week, it seems that come 2022, the traffic cameras that have been on the cards for years will finally come into operation. There's been a pilot scheme running for a few months now where people were sent warnings if they infringed the rules. Well, the Data Commissioner's Office said earlier this week that it had officially approved the operation of traffic cameras with fines from January the 1st. After consulting with the police and the contractor who is putting up the cameras, the Commissioner's Office said it had approved their operation and added that its assistance concerned all stages of the system, from capturing a traffic violation on camera to the payment of out-of-court fines. This, they said, was to ensure that the system's operation would be in accordance with the law on traffic offences and, of course, the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR. But they did clarify that they had called on the police and the contractor to be on constant alert to make sure that both the law and the GDPR was strictly followed. The pilot operation of just 8 traffic cameras, 4 fixed and 4 mobile, started in October, and the authorities said those violating traffic regulations would receive warning letters until the end of the year. This was then delayed after the Data Protection Commissioner found gaps in the procedure. There will eventually be 90 fixed cameras in 30 locations around the island to cover traffic black spots, as well as 20 mobile cameras, which police will use depending on where they feel they're needed. The cameras will report speeding, running a red light and crossing a stop line, but once these are detected, other offences, like the use of a mobile phone while driving, or drivers not wearing a seatbelt, or bikers not wearing a helmet, can also be reviewed. And with the Omicron variant of the COVID-19 virus doing the rounds pretty well all over the world, we've seen it hit Cyprus as much as anywhere else. Paphos hotels say they've been operating at a 30 to 40% capacity so far in December, and that they're seeing cancellations in the wake of the spreading of the Omicron variant. Meanwhile, the government's announced that as of today, the rollout of vaccinations for 5 to 11-year-old children will begin. Initially, parents can book an appointment by calling child welfare centres around the island, but from Tuesday, the 21st of December, the process will move online and bookings will only be made available via the vaccination portal. So with that, let me wish you a very Merry Christmas. I'm going to be taking a couple of weeks off, and I'll see you again in the new year.